Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending where you are. Welcome to webinar Social Justice, Tax Reform and the Taijimen Case, co-organized by the Center for Studies of New Religion and Human Rights Without Frontiers on this World Day of Social Justice. As I like to do, by way of introduction, I would mention an historical case where denial of social justice created very serious and even dramatic consequences. As you know, I'm a scholar of religion, and so I came across this extraordinary tragedy by the way of studying religion. According to a tradition that may or may not be true, in 1775, one of the greatest Indian mystics and poets of the century, Ramprasad Sen, entered the river Ganges singing the praises of goddess Kali. He continued to advance into the river until he disappeared and died. Although common onlookers believe he had drowned in the river, according to his followers, in fact, he had entered into an embrace of pure bliss with the goddess and had died of that beatitude. This real or imaginary death, because there are others who believe that Ramprasad died of old age and illness only some 20 years later, marked the zenith of a religious revival in Bengal, which made the devotion to goddess Kali and tantric rituals inspired by her immensely popular in Eastern India. Religious historians know that often revivals happen after a deep social crisis, and the Kali revival in Bengal was no exception. It came after one of the worst disasters in Indian and indeed human history. East India Company was a British private company that came to rule most of India in the century between 1757 and 1858, when control of the country was transferred from this private company to the British government. In 1764, after a victorious military expedition, the company obtained the administrative control of Bengal, which was bigger than present-day Bengal. It included the present-day Bangladesh, part of Bihar, and other Indian states. And most importantly, the East India Company obtained the right to impose taxes there. And the company realized that the most profitable way of taxing Bengal was by collecting land revenue taxes, because you cannot make the land disappear, and to do it through local tax collectors. And this tax collection were encouraged to be very effective through a system of percentages and bonuses. So this is start seeing something familiar here. Land revenue taxes did exist in Bengal before 1764, but the greedy East India Company all of a sudden raised them by 30% and imposed a yearly quota each collector should reach, no matter how. This placed an impossible burden on impoverished Bengalis, and tragedy struck when it was combined with the droughts of 1768 and a smallpox epidemic, which means for most of the population, it was impossible to pay. However, the quota remained, and the tax collectors didn't want to lose their job and not even to renounce their bonuses. And so they started using violence to compel the taxpayers to pay. In 1769, the rain fell again, but the collectors had to meet their quotas, and so they decided to increase again the amount of their tax requests. The result was that most Bengalis, after having been forced to pay the taxes at gunpoint, had no money left to survive. The original estimate of the victims of the Great Bengal famine was 10 million. Some modern historians have revised it to 1 to 2 million, but nobody really knows because counting the victims in rural areas was impossible. Now, an important point is that most died in 70. In that year, the smallpox epidemic had ended, and the drought had at least temporarily subsided. It was raining. So that proves that the root cause of what many historians today call a genocide was taxes. If it was a genocide, it was a human-made one, and perhaps the only genocide in history caused by taxes. I have mentioned the Kali revival that followed, which also reaffirmed a religious identity Bengalis had perceived as threatened and denied by the East India Company. The terrifying iconography of goddess Kali, many are familiar with, became a fiery symbol of anti-British Indian resistance and was used well into the 20th century. Kali had become the goddess of Indian independence, of justice, but also protest against disastrous taxation. The connection between spirituality, justice, and tax reform has not lost its relevance today. Happily, we do not see tax genocides in our time, but tax injustice can still create considerable suffering. The Taijimen case we are here to discuss today is an egregious example of how taxes can be used both to create great social injustice and to persecute spiritual movements. It is something fit to remember on the World Day of Social Justice, and after the proposal by the Shifu, Grandmaster of Taijimen, Dr. Hong Dao-tzu, in cooperation with the Association of World Citizens, to designate December 19, the day the Taijimen case started in 1996, as the International Day Against Judicial and Tax Persecution by State Power, and we will hear more about it from Thierry Val. The Great Bengal famine of 1770 reminds us that taxes have a destructive power and may be used to deny freedom of religion or belief as well. This is why we support Taijimen deeds in their protest, and we support the declaration of the International Day Against Judicial and Tax Persecution by State Power as well. That concludes my introduction, and before introducing the first speakers, we will have a video. As many of you know, recently it was Lunar New Year for the Chinese around the world, and the video is about Taijimen celebration and wishes for the new year.
At the beginning of the Year of the Rabbit, Taijimen Qigong Academy holds a Chinese New Year gathering on February 11th in Taipei. Participants from 20 countries, including envoys, representatives from the government, media, and academia, gather to experience traditional cultures and send wishes to one another for the new year. Taiji掌门人 Dr. Huang Daozi welcomes the guests and encourages them to carry out commitment to peace and collaborate with one another.
其无更深层的意义是愿力与实践，如世界愿力制宣言所言，以爱与良心为本，将引动无私利他的和平愿力。有愿力就会有行动，团结行动就会成功。
Ambassador of the Republic of Haiti agrees with the idea of Taiji Man.
What Taiji Man is promoting is one of the values that I believe in. Promoting peace and acting for it is one of the best things that as human we can do to change the world. Because the world cannot change if we don't dedicate it truly ourselves to make this kind of change to happen.
Participants perform traditional music and dances to make cultural exchange. The diversity and harmony make the event as one big family. A singer shares love through his songs.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines is where I'm from, and the core of it all is love, sharing love with one another, sharing peace, sharing compassion. And with those core values, that's the way that we're able to move forward and we're able to carry on the legacy of love for our fellow brothers.
These years, Taiji Man promotes the International Day of Conscience, World Prayer Day, and World Day of the Power of Hope around the world. By cultural exchange, it hopes to inspire kindness, solidarity, and concrete actions, wishing everyone to become an angel of love for themselves and others to create a brighter future.
So Marco Respinti and I had a smaller version of this Lunar New Year celebration at the Taiji Man Qigong Academy in Walnut, California. So it was very beautiful. We can only imagine how majestic was the one in Taipei. But it is now time for me to introduce the first speakers. And we will start with Thierry Val, who is the director of an ECOSOC accredited NGO called Coordination des associations et des particuliers pour la liberté de conscience, or the Coordination of Associations and Individuals for Freedom of Conscience. Thierry has been very active in representing before the United Nations the case of Taiji Man, overcoming all the problems connected with the fact that Taiwan is not a member state of the United Nations, and he is continuing in this valuable effort, as we are all persuaded that even if theoretically Taiwan is not a member state of the United Nations, for the United Nations community to hear about the Taiji Man case creates an international effect that may be beneficial to Taiji Man. So Thierry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Massimo, for your introduction. So I will start. Religious and spiritual minorities, some of them slandered through the use of derogatory terms such as cults, continue to be discriminated and persecuted through the abuse of tax law. The European Court of Human Rights has denounced in the past similar abuses against the Jehovah's Witnesses and other groups in France. CAPLC has mentioned in several previous statements the case of Taiji Man in Taiwan. a spiritual movement that has been declared innocent of all criminal accusations raised against it, including tax evasion, yet has continued to be harassed through ill-funded tax bills. These cases are symptoms of a broader problem, the attempt of government and bureaucrats to repress unpopular religious and spiritual minorities through the abuse of administrative and tax provisions. Considering the seriousness of this problem, the ECOSOC-accredited NGO Association of World Citizens and the Taijimen King Kong Academy have designated December 19, the day of the Taijimen case started in 1996, as the International Day Against Judicial and Tax Persecution by State Power, and have issued a declaration of the International Day Against Tax, Judicial and Tax Persecution by State Power. The declaration notes that throughout history often, those in power were driven by greed, pursuing personal ambition for power, wealth, or fame, or who lack the courage to implement the right decisions and policies that will benefit the people, allow unscrupulous officials to break the law and abuse their authority. Such officials often use the judiciary and taxation as tools to discriminate against and persecuted individuals or groups based on race, culture, religion, or belief. This includes depriving these individuals or groups of their rights to personal freedom and or freedom of religions, belief, and thoughts, as well as their property's rights, right to life, and right to survival. The degree of scope of the harm to individuals and society are comparable to those caused by war and torture. Heads of state and regular global citizens alike should cooperate to supervise governmental activities, ensuring that human rights are protected through respect, tolerance, and peaceful dialogue, and that effective rule of law systems benefiting the public and the environment are established to create an harmonious and stable world. Calling all governments to respect the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the document offers specific comments about the abuse of the tax systems. Taxation, it notes, directly affects people's property rights and right to life, which are fundamental rights as well as their dignity. A nation's tax policies and practices, including tax collection, relief, and enforcement, should be based on human rights protection, and they should be lawful, rigorously adhere to due process, and conform to the principles of proportionality and equality. Relevant government officials should not abuse their power, illegally tax people's property, or violate personal freedom in the name of tax collection. It is strictly prohibited for governments and law enforcement agents to use taxes as a tool to target or discriminate against specific peoples or groups. Something that also happens too often at the expenses of religious freedom or belief. We urge the international community, the declaration concludes, to pay special attention to end forbid judicial and tax persecution by public authorities out of respect for conscience and the preservation of human dignity. Accountability for civil servants who abuse their authority and violate the law should be established, and the effectiveness of remedial measures and international monitoring mechanisms should be strengthened. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights should be implemented to fortify the foundation of freedom, justice, security, and peace in the world, uphold the basic dignity of humanity, promote the development of a sound human society, and enhance the well-being of all people. CAPLC endorses the declaration of the International Day Against Judicial and Tax Persecution by State Power, and asks that all the authorities involved in the abuse of tax and administrative provisions to violate human rights and limit freedom of religion or belief, ceased, and this is without delay from this unacceptable form of discriminatory behavior. Thank you.
Thank you, Thierry, and thank you also for your work at the Human Rights Council on behalf of Taiji men and indeed of other groups whose freedom of religion or belief is denied throughout the world. And we have now our second speakers coming from Mexico. It's the second time she participates in a Taiji Men webinar. Her name is Sara Susana Pozos Bravo, and she is a professor at the Universidad Samán de Jalisco in Guadalajara, Mexico, and also is a well-known columnist for daily newspapers in her country. So, Sara, the floor is yours.
Gracias. Buenos días a todos desde México. Buenas tardes, buenas noches. El poder político ejercido al margen de la ley puede devenir en autoritarismos y dictaduras. Las dictaduras representan el terror del poder, que en el mejor de los casos restringe los derechos, pero en el peor los aniquila. La historia del siglo pasado y la de este evidencia cómo el poder político ha pisoteado los derechos humanos y marcado para siempre varias generaciones.
Sarah, I will translate the first part. Good morning from Mexico. Good afternoon to all of you. Political power exercised outside the law can turn into authoritarianism and dictatorship. Dictatorships represent the terror of power that in the best of cases restrict rights, but in the worst annihilates them. The history of last century and of this one shows how political power has trampled on human rights and marked forever several generations.
Taiwán no ha sido la excepción en eso de las dictaduras y sabe mejor lo que es una que ha generado un terror blanco. Los esfuerzos del gobierno de Taiwán desde que se levantó la ley marcial en 1987 por compensar el daño causado debido al incidente del 28 de febrero, la brutal represión de un levantamiento en 1947 que causó la muerte de unos 300,000 civiles y otras violaciones de los derechos humanos, no han podido generar la sensación de justicia en las víctimas y familiares de las víctimas que aún reclaman el juicio a militares y civiles que continúan con vida y que fueron responsables de muchas detenciones y asesinatos de civiles en ese periodo.
Taiwan's dictatorship has been no exception to this rule. The Taiwanese who experience the white terror know what living in a dictatorship means. The efforts by the Taiwan government since the lifting of martial law in 1987 to compensate for the damages caused by the February 28 incident, the brutal suppression of an uprising in 1947, which caused the death of some 30,000 civilians, and other human rights violations, failed to generate a sense of justice for the victims and for their relatives. They were still demanding the trial of the military and civilians who were still alive and who were responsible for arrests and killing of civilians during the martial law period.
Pese a que las señales enviadas por algunos gobiernos de Taiwán posteriores al levantamiento de la ley marcial en el 87, específicamente con respecto al Fondo Económico para resarcir los daños provocados por el terror blanco, pudieran entenderse como acciones democráticas enmarcadas en los derechos humanos, algo inexplicable y vergonzosamente contradictorio deja en evidencia al gobierno o alguna parte de él. Ese algo es el caso Taiji Men.
Although the signals sent by some of the Taiwanese governments that were in power after the lifting of martial law in 1987, specifically with respect to an economic fund to compensate the damages caused by the white terror, can be understood as democratic actions within the framework of human rights, there is something inexplicable and shamefully contradictory, casting doubts on the intention of the government or parts of it. And that something is the Taijimen case.
El caso Taijimen tiene su origen en el abuso de autoridad por parte del poder político y en la transformación del terror blanco al terror de la persecución. Esa transición fue impasse en el que Taiwán intenta reinventarse, pero que justo en ese periodo la justicia clama intensamente y la impunidad parece extenderse décadas.
The Taijimen case has its origin in the abuse of authority by the political power. It was the transformation of the white terror into the terror of persecution. The transition to democracy was a crucial time in which Taiwan tried to reinvent itself. However, precisely in that period, there were cases when justice was denied and impunity seemed to extend for decades.
El caso reviste y revierte la violación sistemática la violación sistemática de los principios universales de igualdad y de no discriminación. En efecto, cuando el poder político encerró en unos conceptos específicos a ciertos grupos religiosos con la intención de estigmatizarlos, comenzó también por fusionar la idea de que los otros no tenían los mismos derechos y por lo tanto podrían ser objeto de persecución y discriminación. A la par, las décadas e incluso siglos de imponer esta visión desde el poder ha sentado una cultura que invisibiliza a los grupos estigmatizados, negándoles todos sus derechos.
The Taijimen case is just a new and blatant case of systematic violation of the universal principles of equality and non-discrimination. Indeed, when the political power defines certain religious and spiritual groups with a specific label with the intention of stigmatizing them, it also starts spreading the idea that the others do not have the same rights as us, and therefore can be subject to persecution and discrimination. At the same time, the decades and even centuries in which the power has imposed this vision have established a culture that makes stigmatized groups invisible, denying them all their rights.
De hecho, el concepto relacionado recibe el nombre de Xie Yao. Este concepto podría ser equivalente al término secta más utilizado de este lado del planeta. El término secta era utilizado para denostar, prejuiciar y estigmatizar a todo grupo que no estuviera de acuerdo con las creencias de la mayoría. Aunque en México incluso algunas leyes y reglamentos contenían dicha palabra, hace algunos años dejó de usarse en las leyes por considerarse altamente discriminatorio.
In Chinese language, the relevant concept is called Sejiao, and this concept can be equivalent to the more commonly used term cult on this side of the planet, or secta in Spanish. The term cult was used to denigrate, prejudice, compromise, and stigmatize any religious group that did not agree with the beliefs of the majority. Although in Mexico, even some laws and regulations contain the equivalent word secta, some years ago it stopped being used in the laws because it was recognized as highly discriminatory.
Algo así entiendo que es el término xie jiao, pero sin duda sus alcances y connotaciones son mucho más graves, porque da pie a una persecución institucional organizada desde el poder político, algo que no ha sucedido, o no al menos recientemente, con el término secta en México. Y cuando el poder político se usa contra la ciudadanía y la población civil para reprimir cualquier intento de democratización, la deshumaniza y aleja de los más altos valores civilizatorios.
I understand the term sejao is somewhat similar, but undoubtedly its scope and connotations are much more serious because it gives rise to an organized institutional persecution from the political power, something that has not happened, or at least not recently, with the term secta in Mexico. And when political power is used against citizens and the civilian population to repress any attempt at democratization, it dehumanizes those who abuse it and distances them from the highest civilizing values.
Casi una década después de haberse levantado la ley marcial en el año de 1996, una oleada represiva demostró que las décadas o siglos en los que se trabajó desde el poder para estigmatizar a grupos que simplemente querían destruir, seguía siendo el derecho consuetudinario que legitimaba toda acción violatoria de los derechos humanos. En consecuencia, el término xie jiao anticipó el terror y dio paso a persecución contra ciertos movimientos religiosos y espirituales falsamente acusados de fraude y uso de magia negra. Nada nuevo para quienes conocen el modus operandi de esa cultura en el contexto del fin de la ley marcial y en el periodo de transición que se vivía en Taiwán, pero completamente inexplicable desde otras latitudes del planeta.
Almost a decade after martial law was lifted in Taiwan, in 1996, a wave of repression demonstrated that decades or centuries in which the political power stigmatized groups it wanted to destroy continued to have effects, and that created a sort of customary law that legitimized serious violations of human rights. Consequently, the use of the term sejao or cult was a recipe for terror and opened the way to persecution against certain religious and spiritual movements falsely accused of fraud or even black magic. It was nothing new for those who knew the modus operandi of a persisting authoritarian culture in the context of the end of martial law and the transition period in Taiwan, but it was difficult to understand from other latitudes of the planet.
El poder político siempre utiliza otros poderes y otros actores para convencer a una población de las mentiras que luego transforma en evidencias y que finalmente usa como pruebas para acusar y condenar a inocentes. Estos poderes son los medios de comunicación, la falta de una auténtica división de poderes, tal y como lo imaginaba Montesquieu, y la corrupción.
The political powers always uses other powers and other actors to convince a population of lies that it then transforms into evidence and finally uses as proofs to accuse and condemn the innocent. These powers are the media, the lack of a true division of powers as envisioned by Montesquieu, and corruption.
El caso continuó. Los medios de comunicación juegan y jugaron un papel importantísimo para construir en la opinión pública una imagen negativa, tergiversada y calumniosa del Taiji Men y de otros líderes religiosos detenidos en la represión de 1996. No obstante, más grave resultó el hecho de que los burócratas de la Oficina Nacional de Impuestos, ONI por sus siglas en español, ignoraron el fallo de la División Penal de la Corte Suprema de Taiwán, que exoneraba al doctor Huang, líder del Taiji-men, y sus coacusados detenidos en esa oleada represiva del 96.
The media played a very important role in building in the public opinion a negative, distorted and slanderous image of Taiji men and of other groups or religious leaders were arrested in 96. Most serious, however, was the fact that the bureaucrats of the National Taxation Bureau, NTB, ignored the ruling of the Criminal Division of the Taiwan Supreme Court, which exonerate Dr. Hong, the leader of Taiji men, and his co-defendants who had been detained in the 96 crackdown.
El caso continuó y se extendió más que cualquier otro de los implicados en la represión de 1996 hasta los poco más de 25 años que hoy se cuentan. ¿Por qué?
The case went on and on, longer than any other of those resulting from the 96 crackdown, and still continues more than 25 years later. Why?
Porque la congruencia de un discurso que promueve la paz exige acciones pacíficas. Porque un discurso que enseña respeto otorga respeto. Porque una organización que tiene el corazón de su cosmovisión espiritual en la armonía entre el cielo y la tierra, facilita la restauración de la salud física, mental y espiritual del ser humano. Y eso es lo que ha hecho el Taiji Men como filosofía de vida espiritual para miles de personas. Y por eso a algunos no les gusta.
Because a discourse that promotes peace demands peaceful action. Because a discourse that teaches respect demands respect. Because an organization that has at the heart of its spiritual worldview the harmony between heaven and earth facilitates the restoration of the physical, mental, and spiritual health of the human beings. And that is what Taiji Men has done as a spiritual life philosophy for thousands of people. And that is why some do not like it.
El Dr. Wong y el Taiji Men han demostrado congruencia entre sus principios morales y religiosos y su actuación. Han soportado todo el peso del poder político durante poco más de 25 años y han manifestado resiliencia en todos los tiempos. La admiración por el grupo ha crecido y la empatía internacional ha sido a su favor, pero de alguna forma la persecución en su contra debe advertirnos sobre la importancia de levantar la voz contra toda injusticia, esté en Taiwán, Corea o en México. La ONG acreditada por el ECOSOC, Asociación de Ciudadanos del Mundo, y la Academia Taiji Men Kyong-gon han designado el 19 de diciembre, día en que comenzó el caso Taiji Men en el 96, como Día Internacional contra la Persecución Judicial y Fiscal por el Poder del Estado. Así, todos los 19 de diciembre, todos los que hemos padecido persecución fiscal o penal o de cualquier tipo, debemos unirnos, compartir experiencias, identificar patrones de abuso de poder, intercambiar opiniones y aplaudirnos por salir a dar la cara contra aquellos que han corrompido el poder para usarlo contra los propios ciudadanos. Las nuevas generaciones deben saber que hicimos todo lo que estuvo en nuestras manos para dejarles un mundo mejor. Muchas gracias y buenas noches para todos.
Dr. Hong and Taiji Men have demonstrated congruence between their moral and religious principles and their actions. They have withstood the full weight of political repression for more than 25 years, and they've shown resilience in all weathers. The admiration for the group has grown and international empathy has been in their favor. However, in some way, the persecution against them should warn us of the importance of raising our voices against all injustice whether in Taiwan, South Korea, or Mexico. The ECOSOC accredited NGO Association of World Citizens and the Taijimen Shigun Academy have designated December 19, the day the Taijimen case began in 96, as the International Day Against Judicial and Tax Persecution by State Power. Thus, every December 19, all of those who have suffered persecution or discrimination, legal, fiscal, or of any other kind, should unite, share experiences, identify patterns of abuse of power, exchange opinions, and applaud each other for coming out to stand up against those who have corrupted power to use it against their own citizens. The new generations must know that we did everything in our power to leave them a better world. Thank you very much and good night to all. So thank you, Sarah, for this very comprehensive assessment of social injustice in the world, particularly in situations of transition from authoritarian regimes to democracy, and the example of the Taijimen case. I will now pass, ideally, the podium for the second part of our webinar to the chair of the second session, Willy Fautré, who is the founder or co-founder and director of Human Rights Without Frontiers, which together with CESNUR is the organization sponsoring this series of webinars, and an internationally well-known fighter for human rights and freedom of religion or belief. So that concludes the first session, and the podium passes now to Willy Fautré for the second session, which will also include a video.
Thank you. I was just going to announce it. So we can start with the video, I think, and then afterwards I will take the floor to introduce the second session, as usual, devoted to the DISI.
Once upon a time, our ancestors passed down a legend. The world was in trouble then, just like the world today. Our world is facing many crises, natural disasters, wars, and epidemics. What can we do to save the world and change our destiny? Is trying to save ourselves the only option we have? If you could change yourself, you could change the world. The children of heaven are calling. How can we turn things around and save the world? All the answers are in the tale. In a quiet and peaceful paradise, a group of children accidentally let the 5 poisons sneak into their hearts. Greed made greedy pluck flowers from others. Hate made angry often fight with others. Ignorance made foolish quarrel over trivial matters and cursed others. Arrogance made arrogant talk behind others' backs. And doubt made doubtful scare people with mischiefs. God spoke to the children in a serious tone of voice.
Oh, my children! The laws of heaven are very strict. Look, the planet shining with blue light is called Earth, where you must reflect on yourselves, change yourselves for the better, so that when your hearts become pure, you will have the chance to return to heaven.
The children of heaven came to Earth one by one. They found that it was a comfortable environment. Blue sky, green land, birds and flowers, everything was thriving. They believed that soon, they will be able to return to heaven and God. After some time, the children became lazy. The 5 poisons made their hearts lose their way. Greedy destroyed nature for her own selfish needs. Angry started a war and fought over territory. Ignorant allow officials that were greedy for bonuses to levy taxes arbitrarily. Arrogant also started a fire. Doubtful brought about flooding that destroyed homes. These dark spirits gradually gathered into a demon with a ferocious face with horns on its head. He spat out a horrible virus as a killer weapon. The infected people crowded the hospital. Many of them lost their lives. The merciful God continued to appeal to people's conscience. As a result, people started to remember the bright treasure given by God, conscience with a beautiful luster. When they were quiet and began to listen to their inner voice, they realized that by following the guidance of their conscience they could protect and calm their hearts. People started fixing their problems while doing good deeds to make up for their past mistakes. At last, the dark spirits on the demon were forced to vanish due to the lack of the 5 poisons. The earth got a chance to rest, and all living creatures could once again coexist in harmony. The children who had changed their thoughts and behaviors restored their purest and truest hearts and finally returned to heaven. Good and evil both reside in our hearts. It is conscience that enables us to distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad, as well as true and false. We are all children of heaven, deep down inside. The degradation of the human heart, caused by the 5 poisons, is the root of the consequences we see today. The only solution lies in our hearts. Only conscience can save oneself and allow one's soul to return to its pure and beautiful homeland.
marvelous, really marvelous. What a very romantic song, spiritual music we have just now listened to, and also a lesson of life from and by a very, very young Dizzy that has shared with us a very, very nice story indeed. And so now we will really start with the second part of the webinar. I will make a small introduction and then give the floor to the Dizzies so that they can share with us their feelings and their personal experience of what it means for them, social justice. The 20th of February was designated the World Day of Social Justice in 2009. The occasion reflects on the significance of social justice for world peace, security, progress, and advancement. Social justice is concerned with maintaining equality for all individuals, which is closely related to human rights. In these last few years, the concept of social justice has enlarged to include a wide range of vulnerable groups, such as religious and spiritual minorities, which are arbitrarily persecuted by bureaucrats or institutions with vested interests. The Taijiman case is a good example of denial of social justice in Taiwan, as it enlightens the never-ending fight of Taijiman for justice. A book titled Who Stole Their Youth is an invaluable source of information about the magnitude of the damage caused by the social injustice inflicted to Taijiman and the Dizzy. For more than 25 years, Taijiman has been fighting in Taiwanese courts against false accusations of tax evasion. In April 1997, Dr. Hong, the founder of the Taijiman Qigong Academy, was indicted by prosecutor Hu for so-called tax evasion. It took him 10 years, a decade, to be declared non-guilty, and he was acquitted of all the charges on final appeal in July 2007. Behind social injustice, we usually find vested interests. In this case, it is a prosecutor who simply does not like Taijiman for unknown reasons and prioritizes his unjustified personal ideas rather than the quest for justice. In 2002, the Control Yuan, the nation's top watchdog body, investigated the management, or the mismanagement, I would say, of the Taijiman case by prosecutor Hu, accused him of abuse of authority, and referred this case to the Justice Ministry for sanctions. According to the Control Yuan's report, Hu was guilty of violating the principle of confidentiality during the investigations, guilty of conducting the investigation on the basis of false evidence, guilty of carrying out searches on far-fetched grounds, guilty of freezing the defendant's property without any evidence of illicit gains, guilty of dealing with the case without using forensic evidence, and guilty for questioning defendants without first lawfully notifying their attorneys. These were very serious charges, and the train of social justice was seemingly moving forward. But the Prosecutor General's office took a lot of time to investigate Prosecutor Hu's case, and we can reasonably suspect that it was on purpose. Indeed, this investigation could not be closed until 2010, several years later. The prosecutor general then concluded that Prosecutor Hu could not be punished just because, according to the law, the 10-year period of his possible administrative responsibility had allegedly expired in June 2007. On this day of social justice, this social injustice in Taiwan needs to be recalled and put back on the radar of the organizations which monitor the state of health of democracy and human rights around the world and also in Taiwan. And now I will give the floor to our first Dizzy, Flora Lin, a university student majoring in food safety. Sorry. The floor is yours, Flora Lin.
Thank you. First and foremost, I would like to thank all of the international scholars for organizing the online forum and providing us as Taijimen Dizi with the opportunity to speak out, as well as for your international efforts to support Taijimen. I'm Flora. Hello, everyone. I would want to voice my feelings regarding the Taijimen case on this World Day of Social Justice. Since I was a baby in my mother's womb, I've been a Taijimen Dizi. I grew up here, and Taijimen is like a big family, so I don't feel lonely despite being the only child. There are brothers and sisters from all walks of life, men and women, young and old, who are sharing what they have learned or the challenges they face in life, exchanging and learning from one another, encouraging each other, and working together for a better future. I have also learned various hard gongfu from various brothers and sisters, and I have learned a lot of wisdom in life, which sets me apart from my peers. Since I was a young child, I've been a shy and reserved person, and if someone asks me to speak in front of the group, I undoubtedly decline. But because of the supportive encouragement from my brothers and sisters, I have gradually learned to speak to lots of people and communicate my emotions in a natural way. Later, I had a chance to play the clarinet at a tea party, which not only made the event more enjoyable, but also helped me build bravery. I must express my gratitude to my Shifu, who enables his Dizi to teach themselves. Therefore, anytime I'm going through a difficult moment or facing a difficulty in my life, I meditate to clear my head and reflect on who I am. As a result, as the dust in my heart seemed to be suddenly swept away, my mind gradually opened and the answers began to come to me unconsciously. This, in my opinion, is what we mean by conscience, since it directs us in the right path, helps us make the right choice, and improves the harmony of our mind, body, and soul. I feel like I'm living a really full and joyful life right now, and I have grown braver and more eager to help others. Being a Taijimen Dizi is a blessing, and I firmly believe that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I am appreciative of my parents for taking me to Taijimen at a young age. This allows me to identify my weaknesses and gradually improve myself through the practice of gongfu. Taijimen also helped me develop into a person who contributes to society, my nation, and the rest of the world. But the Taijiman case, which occurred before I was born, has been going on for 27 years now. Together with my brothers and sisters, I have taken part in numerous lawful tax advocacy events in recent years, including the Kaida-Gelan Boulevard procession, street proposals, and public forums. We have utilized civil and reasonable means to hold posters and hand out flyers on the streets. Whether it's sunny or raining, the Tax and Legal Reform League's persistent volunteers are always visible. Additionally, I have advocated for accurate tax and legal knowledge to passers-by while raising public awareness for tax and legal reform when standing in the crowded Taipei 101 shopping center. I learned more about the details of the Taijiman case as I participated in much more tax and legal reform events and watched online forums. The facts are quite clear. The prosecutor's abuse of authority and legal violations lead to the fabrication of the Taijiman case. And Taijiman has been free of all charges and unpaid taxes since the Supreme Court found it to be so in the third trial, which occurred as early as 2007. As a result, Taijiman has always been innocent. There is no reason why the Taiwanese government should not rectify this case, which is more than a quarter century old, especially when I see older brothers and sisters once again uncovering the scars of their inner pain and talking about the Taijiman case. I feel sad inside because I can hardly imagine the victims having to face the deep pain in their hearts again and again. And many of them pass away before they could even see the day when the fiction has really rectified. Justice delay is justice denial. Therefore, I really hope that the officials would awaken their conscience, have the courage to own up to their mistakes and make amends, revoke all the illegal tax bills, and swiftly rectify the Taijiman case in order to vindicate Sifu and Diji. Taijiman is not only a location for Qigong practice, a good source of positive energy for the globe, but it is also a non-profit public welfare organization. Anyone can find the spiritual treasure they most need to hear, just as I am learning the wisdom of how to behave. So the government must stop its persecution of such a great place and instead permit Taijiman to freely spread love, peace, and the culture of conscience around the world without interference. Taijiman loves Taiwan and wishes for it to flourish, as well as for everyone to live happily and to work peacefully. Last but not least, on this World Day of Social Justice, I believe that government officials will have a conscience and that we will be able to have a secure legal and tax system. Let justice be served, and Taiwan can develop into a real democracy with the rule of law and genuine human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Floraline, for reminding us how you and all the Dizzy fought for years for social justice by taking part in numerous public tax advocacy events in recent years, like the Kaida-Gelan Boulevard procession, street proposals, public forums, also by holding posters and handing out flyers in public demonstrations whatever the weather, by advocating for a fair taxation system to passers-by, or by rousing public awareness for tax and legal reform in your personal context, in shopping centers and many other places. Thank you very much. And now I will give the floor to Robert Yuan, a public servant. The floor is yours.
Hello everyone. I am Yuan Chonglin, a Taiji Men Dizzy and currently serving in the government. I am in my 30th year of practicing at Taiji Men, and looking back, that is more than half of my life. At that time, I had just entered the workplace, and I had been in contact with some practice books. Once I passed by the Taiji Men branch, I felt that the magnetic field echoed. So I took the initiative to go in and learn more about it, and I was sure that this was the place I wanted to join, to learn together. Later, I went through the ancient ritual of worship before starting to practice. Originally, I was a rigid, wooden person with a serious expression, but after learning the yin-yang balancing kung fu and Taiji Men, my mind and body changed a lot and I was able to talk and share with an open heart and joy. This has helped me a lot, not only in changing jobs, but also in finding a marriage partner. And now I have a son and a daughter, and all my family members are practicing together in Taiji Men. In the Taiji Men 1219 incident in 1996, Inspector Ho Quanzhen led a large number of prosecutors and media to search all the branches in Taiwan without noticing and forcibly took away our sifu. At that time, this Taiji Men incident was a sensation, occupying all the major media pages every day. And even our brothers and sisters living overseas called back to Taiwan to express their concern. Were branches still there? It is really saddening. The public has been influenced by media reports and has a wide range of misconceptions about our brothers and sisters, as well as their families. Those who were recommended to join Taiji Men are family members, relatives, friends, supervisors, and colleagues of the company. Initially, we all trusted each other, and together we settled our minds, cultivated our character, and practiced Qi to maintain our health. But negative media coverage made many people fearful and afraid to come to practice. Also, family members' misunderstanding and lack of understanding caused family discord. My wife, children, and I would not have had the opportunity to practice and grow together here if it hadn't been for the many brothers and sisters who have committed to safeguard the place. When something happens, it is the disciples who serve the labor. Confucius once said, Sifu has taught and cared for us as Zi with all of his heart and soul. And when Taiji Men faced an unprecedented disaster, we hoped to share our concerns with our Sifu. At the time, some senior disciples like me stepped up to lead on how to defend our houses. But we were likewise under a lot of pressure. We had to struggle with questioning from friends, relatives, and colleagues, and family members who didn't understand us would severely discourage us from practicing, forcing many disciples to give up. Dizzy who still wanted to come practice were nervous, and had to put their practice outfits in their backpacks, and change into their regular clothes before returning home to avoid unusual looks from spectators or questioning from family members. Only 6 days after the illegal search, prosecutor Ho Quanzhen failed to find the proof, and instead publicly lured the public through the media, calling for the establishment of a self-help association on the grounds of completing the registration as soon as possible in order to ensure their rights first, attempting to create the illusion that many people were victims, and then reverse the consequences to fabricate the charges. Some people were tempted to force their family members to join the self-help group, or to register on their behalf under false pretenses. When the Dizzy who still came to practice appeared on the list of self-help groups, it caused mutual suspicion. For those who really wanted to practice, the negative atmosphere of distrust between people became a wound that could never be erased. There was an elderly grandmother Dizzy who traveled from Zhonghua the south-central part of Taiwan, to Taipei, for hours each week in her practice outfit in order to practice and meet with her children in passing. She never stopped even during that period of time, when there was a lot of tension. She once stated with great outrage that a taxi driver in Taipei once drove her to a remote park while telling her he wanted to teach her a lesson, because he had been misled by the media into believing Taiji men were a malicious religious organization. The driver even said that if she had the ability to climb those steps, go over that hill, and walk to the main road to get a car. She did not have a cell phone at the time to call for help, but her usual practice foundation allowed her to step on the stage very solidly. Meanwhile, as the cab driver kept saying nasty things behind her back, she was left to swallow her tears. Although that sister has passed away, her resolute but helpless figure is still deeply engraved in my heart. The Taiji Men 1219 incident, after heated discussions and research by experts and scholars from home and abroad, was confirmed to be a thoroughly wrongful and false case, also known as the Legal Tax 228 incident. In addition to the fact that the prosecutor's unlawful investigation and prosecution has led to the destruction of the Taiji men, it has also caused anxiety in the community. After years of litigation, although the Taiji men has been judicially cleared through third trial verdict confirms innocence of all charges and taxes, the offending prosecutors have been promoted without sanction, and the government has no punishment mechanism at all. Under the mutual coverage of the officials, they have also illegally and forcibly auctioned off the Taiji men's predetermined site. I really don't know where human rights and justice lie. I call on the Taiwan government to immediately prosecute the offending judges and return justice and human rights to Taiji men, so that human rights in Taiwan can be put back on the right track.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that story with us, and for stressing in this way the negative role of the media in their coverage of the Taiji Man case right from the beginning, and their destructive repercussions on the daily life of the dizzy. Misconceptions about Taiji Man presented as a malicious spiritual organization, suspicions from friends and colleagues, misunderstandings and discord in families, pressure by beloved ones to stop practicing. Thank you for your testimony, Robert Yuan. And now I will give the floor to Lina Liu, Fund Manager.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nina, and I'm pleased to share my thoughts on social justice in Taiwan today. I'm a fund manager in an investment trust company. In my position, I have observed an interesting phenomenon. That is, when the event does not involve the government's own interests, the government will set strict rules for counterparties to follow in order to protect the rights of both sides. However, if the government's own interests are involved, even though there are strict rules, they don't follow them. Why am I saying so? Let's look at the following points. First, the primary duty of a fund manager is to make investments in the fund. All employees, including CIO and division head in the investment department, must have their cell phones under centralized supervision during Taiwan Stock Exchange trading hours in order to prevent fund managers from putting their own interests above those of investors by taking the lead in trading in their own personal accounts, using information obtained from their duties and thereby enriching themselves. On the contrary, the National Taxation Bureau of Taiwan budgets hundreds of millions of dollars in tax incentives each year, which has enticed tax officials to issue arbitrary illegal tax bills that put their personal interests ahead of that of others and cause great suffering for the people. The same self-enriched behavior The investment trust company is strictly regulated, but government tax officials can do whatever they want without being regulated. Second, investment trust companies may inevitably make errors when calculating NAV, or net asset value. If an error is detected, all incorrect NAVs from the past must be fixed, regardless how many days the error had been made. And investors who have lost money as a result of incorrect NAVs must be fully compensated. Doing so is to treat each investor fairly. In contrast, in many administrative tax cases in Taiwan, even though the administrative court ruled in favor of the litigant, the tax bill was only sent back to the NTB for another disciplinary measures. The NTB amended the amount and issued another incorrect tax bill instead of actually correcting the error, resulting in many tax injustice cases. The illegal tax bills could persist for hundreds of years, becoming an odd phenomenon in Taiwan. Taijimen case is a typical example. The tax bills for 1990 and 1993 to 1996 have been adjusted to zero. Why isn't the same kind of tax bill for year 1992 rectified to zero? The NTB should have known that this outcome is incorrect. Why would the NTB refuse to admit the mistake? It is suspected that this is related to tax incentives. Both the investment trust company and the NTB have made mistakes, while the investment trust company must fully admit their mistakes and make up investors' losses in order to protect investors' rights, while the NTB can refuse to admit their mistakes and even seize people's property. Where are the people's basic property rights and the survival rights? Last, when the investment trust companies files an application for a new fund, the type of the fund, or for example, an equity fund or a bond fund, must be specified. Once the fund application had been approved, the nature or the type of the fund cannot be changed and must be invested accordingly. A bond fund is required to invest in bonds, even if it has more bullish view on stocks, because investments must be consistent with the nature of the fund to ensure that investors' right to participate in bond market cannot be compromised. Back to the Taijimen case, Taijimen Qigong Academy was founded in 1966, joined the Taipei Martial Arts Association, the Chinese Qigong Association, and became the permanent group member of Chinese Taoism Association. Taijimen is an ancient Menpai of Qigong, martial arts, and self-cultivation. Taijimen Qigong has been passed down from Sifu to Dizi. Its nature has never been changed. Why is the year 1992 taxable, but not the other years? How did Taijimen suddenly turn into a cram school and become taxable in 1992? In addition, the NTB acknowledged that Taijimen was not a cram school in a formal document. If a fund manager makes investments that are inconsistent with the type of the fund, they are at risk of being fined or even suspended. Why did the NTB have the authority to arbitrarily identify Taijimen as a cram school and issue an illegal tax bill of 1992? Even the Ministry of Finance, which is in charge of cram school, has repeatedly and clearly confirmed that Taijimen is not a cram school, but the NTB pays no attention to it, even though in 2009, the Control Yuan cited 7 violations made by NTB in their investigation report on Taijimen case. However, NTB never corrected its mistakes and was never punished. The NTB's abuse of authority has resulted in the persecution of human rights, which is unquestionably no less than the damage caused to investors by fund managers who do not invest properly. But it has not been strictly controlled or managed, leading to a very unfair situation in Taiwanese society. That's why I say that governments or officials themselves may ignore the law and violate human rights if it serves their own interests. If an investment trust company consistently breaks the rules and damages investors' rights, it will lose the trust of investors and not be able to raise new funds on the market in the future. Isn't it the same with the government? If government officials abuse their authorities and violate taxpayers' human rights, people will lose faith in government. How can such a government lead a country? The main goal of a taxation system is to reduce wealth gap between people so that social resources can be reasonably distributed in line with social fairness and justice. The government earns the confidence of the people so that the economy can grow prosperously and country can progress steadily. Therefore, on the World Day of Social Justice, I would like to urge the government to fully implement social justice, respect taxpayers' human rights, and restore justice to the people so that basic human rights can be effectively protected and to realize a society where everyone has equal access to wealth, well-being, and fairness. Thank you all.
Yeah, and thank you, Lina Liu. Very interesting contribution in which you insisted on the fight for the common good and against personal selfish interests to preserve social justice. And as a fund manager, you shared with us the good practices in your professional environment in comparison with the bad practices, the public sector of the Taiwanese tax administration. First, as you said, in your private company, the behaviors of all the staff are strictly regulated. For example, the cell phones of all the employees, including the CIO and division heads, are under centralized supervision during Taiwan Stock Exchange. During those trading hours of the Taiwan Stock Exchange, in order to prevent fund managers from putting their own interests above those of investors. Concerning the NTB, the tax officers can do whatever they want in total impunity in Taiwan without being regulated and strictly supervised. And second, you said that investment trust companies may inevitably make errors, but if an error is detected, even after many days, it will be fixed in the interest of the investor and fully compensated. In the case of Taijimen, the NTB persisted in its error for over 25 years and penalized the organization by confiscating its property instead of recognizing its mistakes and even its wrongdoings. And now I will give the floor to Dorian Tseng, a university student majoring in music. The floor is yours, Dorian.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dorian, and I'm 20 years old, and I'm a second-year student in the music department store of the University of Education. I've been learning Qigong with health and life wisdom from Shifu Dr. Hong Daozi since I was a child. In the big family of Taiji men, although coming from different background and life, brothers and sisters are like my family members, always show the Gongfu learning from Shifu, cheer each other up and give them a lot of positive energy. In the process of growing up in Taiji men, the most of different things on the road of life is that if I encounter difficult or hard and I can't pass, I just need to adjust my breathing and thought first, clamp down and communicate with myself. Often through the process of clamping down, I can find another way to solve the problems. When I'm in second years of junior high, it is a time with the 15th anniversary of establishment of Taiji men. I'm very glad to have an opportunity to participate in cultural performance in San Francisco and Los Angeles with my brothers and sisters, with Dr. Hong Daozi. Music is the most primitive way to convey mood and emotion. When we practice orchestra, brothers and sisters will remind us the love part excerpt from Shifu is that we should convey our wish for the world better and better through the notes we play. Let the VIP guests at the meeting can experience this heart that we want. This kind of experience made me realize that music has an energy that can transcend differences such as nationality, race, language, religion, and culture to allow people to communicate emotion. In Taijiman cultural activities, we will enthusiasm invite friends from various countries and industries to participate our event. Sometimes it is impossible to fully understand each other's thoughts due to the language barrier. However, when we pick up the instrument and play music, everyone will dance or clap to the brisk rhythm. It made me realize that Shifu said we should listen to our inner voice and let our conscience lead us so that we can get closer to each other. November last year, it is a great honor to be invited to from Taiji men with Shifu, and brothers and sisters went to the Montessori school in Lucknow in India to participate in the International Conference and Global Chief Justice. In this conference and summit, we meet judges, leaders, and scholars from many countries, sharing the issue about world justice, peace, and human rights with each other. In addition, we also went to the campus to listen to the ideas for justice in the world from young people and students. After listening to many people through the word peace and justice, I found that regardless of age, education, or social status, many people believe that the trigger points that can promote world peace and justice depend on their own conscience. I'm a student in University of Education and hope to be a teacher in the future. When I practice in campus, see students who are more in need of help, such as inaddition or unstable emotional control. I don't preconceive that they are bad students. Perhaps they have hidden secrets or unique qualities. I will sincerely listen and understand their needs and do my best to help them reduce the occurrence of unique treatment or bullying may happen at school. When I need to spend more effort and time. This is the conscience that I learned in Taiji men, when it makes me want to do something that are more helpful or to these children. I'm very lucky to learn and grow in Taiji men. Shifu Dr. Hong Daozi teach us the principle of life and conduct, distinguishing between right and wrong, true and false, good and bad, by example words and on speech teaching. But there is a sad thing in 2010. In the third grade of elementary school, I stood on the stage of Kaidao with my brothers and sisters and protesting the fake case of Taiji men, persecution under the cold courage of the overlord. With the slogan I wrote, I bravely went to the stage and read, "Tax reform to save Taiwan. All the people stand up." And our heartfelt voice. Taijimen is the place where I grew up. 师父 Dr. Hong Daozi teach us to distinguishing between good and bad, right and wrong, true and false. As far as I can remember, Taijimen has always been an upright and a breathbold place for practicing. It must something that the government official go wrong. They want to sell off our house and auction off our land. At a young age, I only hope that the president can govern with conscience and love people. I can't believe that it has been more than 26 years since the first case of Taijimen has been wronged, but it has not been rehabilitated. The fearless little girl who are brave and brave the cold winds has now grown up to be a college student. I used to be afraid to mention the Taijimen incident or to strangers. Because of the false report and smear of the media, the public has a deep misunderstanding of Taijimen. However, after the establishment of the law and tax reform essence, more and more volunteers, experts, and scholars have worked together to rehabilitate tax victims in Taiwan. Inspire me to stand up together, work hard of Taiwan tax system reform, and work hard for readjusting the fake case of Taijimen. I believe that the government can uphold fairness and justice for the people, can bring happiness and hope to the people. I sincerely hope that the government can hear the voice of our young people and don't ignore our young people's call for the rule of law and respect for human rights. I am very happy to be able to participating in this forum with you today on the World Social Justice Day to explore my own vision of justice in the world. I also thank all experts and scholars for their long-term attention to the Taijimen case and hope that the Taiwan government can return Taijimen innocence and justice as soon as possible. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dorian Singh. Music is indeed your best instrument to convey mood and emotion, to try to make the world better and to open the minds to your message that social justice depends on their own conscience. Music has an energy that can transcend differences such as nationality, race, language, religion, and culture, as you said, to allow people to better communicate emotions. Thank you for your contribution. And I will now give the floor to the last Dizzy, Andrea Tsai, sales representative. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrea. I read a lot of information about justice, and I found that justice is not easy to define. There was a news in this month in Taiwan. An old woman get on the train and saw a sleeping student on priority seat. She woke the student up with insults until the student gave his seat and apologized with tears on his face. What would you have done if you were in the train? If I were in the train, I would stop the woman. I would like to ask you a question. Is there a wrong thing to choose not to be silent about this matter? I wanted to do this. I found that this is not a question of legal right or wrong. Why would I want to do that? For me, although I can define justice clearly, there is a voice in my heart that tells me what is right and what I should do when such an incident occurs. In Taiwan, there is an idiom, 见义勇为 means righteousness and behaving in a correct way. And I always appreciate those people who in pace of righteousness, and I want to be the one of those people. And last year on this day, an online forum was held for World Day of Social Justice. Dr. Hong Daozi, Vice President of Association of World Citizens, and Zhang Menren of Taijimen, gave a speech saying, "Everyone is born with a conscience, which guides people to seek social justice." And in a recent speech at the UN General Assembly, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, "Peace can be ensured if every country fulfill its obligations under the UN Charter. It's time to change the way we pursue peace, to renew our commitment to the UN Charter, to put human rights and dignity first, and to keep conflict prevention in mind. Conflict is not only a physical conflict, but also a conflict in which the powerful use the imperfection of the system, of the advantage of holding power to cause harm and injustice." On December 19th, 1996, the illegal and abusive prosecutor Hong Kuan-ren created Taijimen case. He led a trend of media handling in Taiwan, arresting people without evidence and breaking exclusive news headlines before an investigation. The point is that everything he said is false, at the same time as create countless problems. Taijimen is my home, and is an example of how are treated unjustified. I grew up in Taijimen, which is an ancient Menpai of Qigong martial art. I practice Qigong with my family to strengthen my body and mind. Our family has found happiness in Taijimen. My mother loved me so much. Then she took me in Taijimen when I was a baby. Yes, Mom felt that Taijimen was a good place when she came across it, and so she brought our family to practice Qigong. Initially happy, it's inexplicable in discredited by Hong Kuan-ren because of the news. Mom was ridiculed by her colleague and her family, who did not understand her and even felt that she had been cheated. In spite of these attacks, my mother said to me, "I can always buy your side because I'm busy and work. So I brought you into Taijimen. It's best way to stay here." I'm so relieved. When the ununiformed public was misled and the society was swarming with injustice opinions towards my shifu, my shimu, my brothers and sisters, my mom still chose Taijimen because she was convinced that this place would not let her children become worse. When I grew up, now I'm 29 years old, I still don't understand why there are so many people who broke the law and abused their power to destroy such a good place. From the time I was a teenager, we make the statement about Taijimen case on streets and on government. Now an adult, Taijimen case is still not over, and even in 2020, the National Tax Bureau and Administrative Enforcement Agency have illegally and forcibly auctioned off the land of Taijimen. Many brothers and sisters who have not seen the end of the case have already passed away. I don't know how much longer it will take before Taijimen case is truly vindicated, so that Shifu, Shimu, brothers and sisters can feel at ease at the true legal tax justice will come.
Last year in November 2022, I have the opportunity to participate in the International Conference of Chief Justice of the World in India to spread love and peace with my Shifu, Dr. Hong Daozi. All the guests who come to the conference were judges or leaders from different countries. At the time, the Veil of World Peace and Love ceremony was specially held, and 5 important leaders, including Mr. Privilegied C. Rubin, President of the Republic of Mauritius, and were invited to ring the bell and make a wish for peace. My feeling about this journey is we use the power of goodness to transmit ideas and exchange emotions, and what remains in our hearts will only be love. If everyone in the world starts from conscience, there will be fairness and justice. As my Shifu, Dr. Hong Daozi said, unite yourself first, then unite others, from the individual and the group to the group, to the society, to the nation, and finally to the world. Don't we all want to live a peaceful and happy life? I hope that in the future, we can truly achieve social justice and fairness in the world. Thank you all.
And thank you, Andrea Tsai, for sharing your testimony and your experience with us. You were really privileged to participate last year in that forum related to the World Social Justice Day, and to have memorized a crucial sentence of Dr. Hong when he said, everyone is born with a conscience which should guide people to seek social justice. The lesson you drew from it is that if everyone in the world follows his conscience, there will be fairness and justice, and I agree with you. Thank you very much for speaking to all of us about your personal experience. And now we have reached the end of this second session, and I will give the floor back to Massimo Introvigni to introduce the last speaker of this webinar. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Willie. We were all moved by the positive and negative experiences of Taiji Men Dis. Positive because they had some wonderful experiences in Taiji Men, both in their private, personal and professional life, and in accompanying Dr. Hong to war tours to faraway countries and meeting with VIPs and luminaries, but also negative experiences because of the slander their families had to endure during and after the 1996 crackdown. So we are coming near the conclusion of our seminar, and the last speaker will be Marco Respinti, an Italian journalist and scholar who serves as director in charge of Bitter Winter magazine. And in the end, the event will conclude with a video, which is a musical chronicle of the efforts of Taiji Men during the years to present their peace and love message in different countries, and also to protest against the injustice of the Taiji Men case in Taiwan. So before the video, Marco Respinti will present the conclusions of the webinar. Marco, the floor is yours.
He had some technical trouble a few minutes
ago. Yeah, I
ago.
see in the chat that Marco has some technical problems. So what I would recommend to our technical personnel is to start with the video while Marco tries to reconnect.
Yeah.
Thank you for the beautiful video. And I believe Marco Respinti has now been able to reconnect. And so without further ado, I would pass the podium to him.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, welcome back.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, technology sometimes keeps me pain in the neck. So thank you so much for this yet another important webinar, very rich, which was animated by papers by scholars, presented by scholars, and testimonials by Dizzy, that the two chairmen of the two sessions of this webinar presented and summarized in a very peculiar and important way, highlighting a few key elements. And I do thank CESNUR, the Center for Studies on New Religions and Human Rights Without Frontier, for organizing this series, and especially today's webinar entitled Social Justice, Tax Reform, and the Taijimen Case, underlining and celebrating the World Day of Social Justice. It has been a very rewarding experience. In fact, the concept of social justice is in itself simple. It is the ideal of establishing a just society among human beings, the first and basic tenet of which is avoiding any abuse of power, direct or indirect. Achieving social justice is instead much more difficult. Probably social justice is the most ancient communal, hence political, ideal of humanity. No one, in fact, would say the opposite or dare say the opposite. We never hear a political system, a state, a regime, or an individual involved in social business saying that their program is to establish social injustice. Even the most unjust political regime never says it, past and present. Although no one can theoretically deny that a person can do evil for the sake of evil in full conscience, all people and all political regimes invariably present their programs and actions, even the most horrible, as good. People who do evil, claiming it is good, are divided into two categories: blatant forgerers and people in good faith. Both lie. Forgerers want others to believe their lies, and people in good faith believe their own lies. While the first category, forgerers, is overall cynical, the second, people in good faith, is idealistic. But idealism for that kind of people means fanatism. It is clearly the case of ideologies that turn into idiocracies when they take power. German-American political philosopher Eric Voegelin brilliantly discusses the topic in his 1938 Die politischen Religionen, or The Political Religions, now republished as volume 5 of the collected works of Eric Voegelin by University of Missouri Press. Ideologies and idiocracies conserve the total dedication of a true spiritual faith, but they fake the relationship between human beings and God, whatever is the name you give to him, being then one of the many variants of materialism. This is why ideologies can propose the most mortifying folly with no shame, and idiocracies can perpetrate the most horrendous crime without embarrassment. They even justify bloodsheds as a reasonable price for the final liberation of human beings that they call social justice. Yet social justice remains a key concept of communal life to achieve peace among nations. This is why it is perfectly adequate to discuss social justice in relation to Taiji Men. In fact, Taiji Men and FOPL, that Taiji Men founded and promotes, constantly and tirelessly work for mutual understanding and universal love. First, though, we need to know what social justice truly is. Toward this goal, the contribution given by two authors is invaluable. They are both Italian and both Roman Catholics, both priests and both much neglected, or at least often misrepresented. They are quite interesting authors because they both serve much the cause of truly defining social justice, while their philosophical approaches diverge and are in some ways even opposed. They are Jesuit Father Luigi Taparelli d'Azeglio and the blessed Father Antonio Rosmini Serbati. In 2013, noted Argentinian-American economist Alejandro Chafuen had the occasion to thin out the fog surrounding Taparelli and Rosmini in a remarkable article aimed at clarifying and even vindicating the true meaning of social justice, an article which was published in no less a magazine than Forbes, the worldwide famous business review. Quote, Nobel laureate Friedrich Hayek, Chafuen wrote, was correct in pointing out that the term social justice became widely used after a noted Jesuit, Luigi Taparelli d'Azeglio, used it in what was the most important natural law treatise during the 19th century in the Latin language world. Taparelli's book, The Argentinian-American Economist Continues, quote, was translated into Spanish and French, but never into English. Perhaps That explains why Hayek made a mistake by implying that Taparelli used the term in the same corrupted, popular interpretation that sees social justice as, and this is a quote from Hayek, taking from the rich and giving to the poor. In fact, Chaffin explains Taparelli belonged to a rich tradition where social justice has little or nothing to do with redistribution by government. It has more to do with order in society and with the justice that goes beyond courtroom justice, end of quote. Let's interpret Chaffin's remarks in its deepest and broader sense. Social justice has little or nothing to do with interference by abusive power, be it from a government, a rogue bureaucrat, an ideological faction, or an organized group. As Father Taparelli made clear, Chaffin says, justice implied in social justice is not only what the law establishes. It includes also the strictly, even technical, legal aspect of law, but it is chiefly a matter of social concord. It is philosophical before being legal. It is spiritual in nature. As to the second authority, Father Rosmini, he, Chaffin, succinctly notes, quote, had similar views on this topic, end of quote. Now, Taparelli and Rosmini deserve much closer study. Wishing this can soon come true, let me introduce a final consideration on the topic through a quote and an exercise in usability. The quote, society ensures social justice when it provides the conditions that allow associations and or individuals to obtain what is their due according to their nature and their vocation. Social justice is linked to the common good and the exercise of authority, end of quote. The usability of this quote calls Taijimen in. Taijimen is a spiritual way that put human conscience at the center of everything for achieving a decent way of conducting life among human beings and nations. The usability of this previous quote in connection to Taijimen also calls the Taijimen case in. The Taijimen case is an unbelievable example of social injustice that has been lasting for 27 years since December 19th, 1996, although several courts of law, and we were reminded today, ruled that all charges against that movement are unsustainable. So now I physically apply the previous quote to Taijimen. For 27 years, Taijimen has been denied the condition that allow individuals associated with that movement to obtain what is their due according to their nature and their vocation as human beings endowed of certain unalienable rights. Rogue and corrupt bureaucrats claiming to know better, as ideologues and idiocrats always do, acted as fanatic zealots for evil, presenting it as good, and imposed a distorted concept of social justice based on a blatant injustice to Taijimen Shifu, or Grandmaster, and Dizi, or disciples. Doing so, those bureaucrats disavowed the essence of their vocation as public servant. In fact, and I requote the previous quote, as social justice is linked to the common good and the exercise of authority, authority is to be always and only exercised in the name of the common good, which is the personal good of each and all individual living in a society, combined to the good of a whole society in its entirety and considered as family, a human family, which has been the topic of a previous webinar in this series. I am sure you tolerate my liberty in quoting a third Catholic source. The simple and for this reason beautiful and universal definition of true social justice, which I have used here, just a few seconds ago, and then applied to both the Taiji-Men movement and the Taiji-Men case as the exemplary case of all cases of social injustice, is taken from the 1997 Editio Typica, or definitive edition, of the Catechism of the Catholic Church at number 1928. I used it because it served me to conclude that in the Taiji-Men case, some authorities failed their mission of supporting and fostering social justice, deforming both the rule of law and one of the most important spiritual tenets of mankind. Thank you.